A very good afternoon to all of you, to the distinguished guests, and to the sponsors and organizers of GIPC. I welcome you all to this session of, which is the breakout session 6, and deals with pharmaceutical industry, overcoming the barriers to building a successful IP business strategy. Here, I have been given the responsibility of moderating the entire proceedings, and here are my co-speakers, Mr. Oliver Ladendorf, who is the first speaker for this session. The second speaker will be myself, and you will have to bear with me for a post-tea session, which is not a very conducive session for such conferences. And then you have Mr. Shamim Ahmad, who will also be talking on this in this matter. And we will try as much as possible not to cover overlapping topics. And let's see how it goes. So I would like to invite Mr. Oliver Ladendorf. And I would request you to kindly introduce yourself and start. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon. First of all, thanks to the organizers for giving me the opportunity to speak here. A few words to myself. I'm a European and German patent attorney working for the Munich-based IP law firm Kraus and Weisert. Thanks. I'm a trained molecular biologist, so I was working at the Max Planck Institute in Marburg for a while, and then switched fields, and I'm now active in the IP field since more than 15 years. The topic I would like to speak about today is quite special, but it might be quite important also for Indian companies in particular, because it touches the problem of producing generics medicaments and bringing them to Europe. So this is, I believe, a business model also for Indian companies, and now this business model is about to change quite a bit, because the European Union has introduced what they call a manufacturing wafer, and I will speak about that in the next minutes. No. Okay, here we go. First of all, a brief introduction into the notion SPC. The SPC is a supplementary protection certificate. It was introduced in the European Union in '92. Why did they do that? They wanted to compensate originators for the loss of time between the filing of a patent application and the granting of the marketing authorization for medicament. So the SPC is a patent term extension, but it's not similar, well, it's similar, but it's not identical to the patent term extension as you know it from the US. So it extends the 20-year exclusivity granted by the patent by adding an additional period of 5 years upon the expiry of the patent. Okay, that was one too fast. Can we get back? Okay. Here you see comparison of the SPC system and the US patent term extension system. So the SPC, in fact, does not extend to the term of the patent itself. What it extends, or what it protects, is the authorized use of an active ingredient which is defined as a product. That might be covered by just one claim of a patent. So it may be granted for medicinal products and also for plant protection products. The US case is a bit different, so you extend the term of the patent itself, and it may be generally granted for any type of patent in order to compensate for delays in the application procedure. So this idea is identical. So important is actually the question of what is a product, and a product is not necessarily identical to what is covered by the entire patent. Okay, that was too fast as well. Okay, Here we have an overview of the legal basis for the SPCs. As you might know, the European Union tries to define the legal framework via regulations. These regulations are from time to time updated, and the national states then have to deal with these regulations. And here we have a situation where the SPC, of the first legal text for the SPC was already established in 1902 and then entered in force into 93. That first regulation was updated several times, and it was finally replaced by a regulation in 2009. We have in the medicinal products field one type of regulation, and we have a quite similar type of regulation for the plant protection products. Both regulations are mostly identical or substantially identical. So case law, which deals with one type of product, for instance, a medicinal product, may also be useful then for the plant protection product. The regulations are applicable in all European Union states. However, the decisions on SPCs or the requests for SPCs, they are sent to the national patent offices, and the decisions are coming from the national patent offices. So the SPCs are actually valid only in the state in which they are granted. So if you want to have a Europe-wide or European Union-wide SPC, you need to go to every single national patent office and request an SPC there, which makes things quite complicated and also expensive. Okay, let's have a very quick look at the calculation of the SPC term. Briefly, the duration of the SPC is calculated as period of the patent filing to the first market authorization minus 5 years. So the maximum duration of the SPC will in any case be 5 years, so no longer than 5 years. In the example I've shown here, you see the filing date of the patent year 0, and then the first market authorization 8 years later. If you then subtract 5 years, you have an SPC duration of 3 years. On the next slide, you see some examples where you can see how this thing is actually done in practice. So in the first example, the patent was filed on November 1st, 2000. The marketing authorization was granted 10 years later, November 1st, 2010. So this is a period of time of 10 years, a delta of 10 years. So what we have here is the maximum SPC duration, which is 5 years, and that would commence on November 1st, 2020, 20 years after the patent was filed. In example 2, we have a different situation. The patent was filed 5 years later, November 1st, 2005. The marketing authorization was already granted 5 years after that, on November 1st, 2010. So there's a delta of only 5 years. This leads to no SPC protection. And the example 3 is the opposite case, so to say. So the patent was filed quite early in 1995, and then the marketing authorization was granted in 2010, so there's a gap of 15 years. However, since we have a 5 years cap, we only get 5 years SPC protection, and in that case, it would start in the year 2015. What is the SPC manufacturing wafer now? So this is the question I would like to convey some information to you this afternoon. So although a valid SPC still exists, this wafer allows for manufacturing of a product within the European Union protected by the SPC with two different purposes. For the purpose of either exporting that product to countries outside of the European Union where no protection exists, or second alternative, with the purpose of stockpiling these products for a release in the European Union market once that SPC has expired, so the typical day one entry. In order to do so, you need to comply with certain notification and labeling requirements. The wafer is defined in a way that it does not affect other IP, in particular secondary patents granted for the same product. So it's mainly about the question of whether it's possible to export the product and stockpile the product in the European Union. The whole thing is quite new, so it was discussed, I think the discussion started several years ago, but late 2018, the discussion became more dynamic, and then in the beginning of 2019, they were discussing several ideas and finished actually these discussions then within the next month, so that the regulation, or an update to the regulation I should say, which is now redefining Regulation 489 from 2009, that this update actually became into effect already on July 1, 2019. However, the wafer will not be active right away, but will be introduced gradually with different regimes depending on the filing date of the SPCs. So it will apply to all SPCs which are filed on or after July 1st, 2019. The SPCs which are applied for before July 1, 2019 will only be affected from July 2, 2022 on, and the wafer does not apply to SPCs already in force on July 1st, 2019. So the earlier you received your SPC, the better it was. The later you are, the more problematic it might be. Why was the introduction of that wafer considered necessary? Well, what we see here is an excerpt from the explanatory memorandum of the European Union. So there were ongoing discussions internally, and they actually were balancing different things. First of all, IP is important for innovators, but they saw some disadvantages for European companies in terms of producing medicaments in the European Union territory. So they saw the problem of a loss to export markets and a lack of timely day one entry into European Union member states following the expiry of the SPC. So that effect was apparently unintended, and I need to say that the SPC legal framework, or the legal text of the SPC, is not well drafted, so it's not a real surprise that it was including also these unintended effects. However, having understood that this is a problem, they now try to counteract, and the European Union saw a need to manufacture, to allow the manufacturing inside the European Union. And then there was also an economic issue here. They were looking at the market and the market size, and they came to the conclusion that innovative medicines and biologics will account for a quarter of the pharmaceutical market by 2022, and the market size was calculated to be 90 billion euro, and that would be money or could be money that can be lost to other countries. And at the same time, it was considered to create a huge additional opportunity for growth and jobs in Europe. So the European Union wanted to participate in that manufacturing opportunity, in particular of biosimilars and also generics, and it needed to do that quite fast. So this was, these were the main considerations here. And if this works, here we go. And this shows a slide coming actually from the agency Medicines for Europe, which is a generics agency. So they were actually promoting this manufacturing wafer quite a bit. And you can see here the same arguments provided in a graphical manner. So you see in the middle of the upper panel the missed opportunities, the number of potential jobs, the money that could be earned by or could not be earned by producing these medicaments outside of the European Union. And on the lower part, you see the impact of the manufacturing, or the believed impact of the manufacturing wafer, which actually allows companies to produce the medicaments for exporting right before the expiry of the SPC, and also allows them to stockpile them. Can you move it on? I think it doesn't work. Okay. Here you can see some of the key features. As I've said before, one of the key features is that the effects of the SPC will be curtailed to no longer confer protection against manufacturing of SPC-protected active ingredients and corresponding products for two purposes. One is exporting to third countries outside of the European Union, and the other one is stockpiling for day one entry into the European Union. What does export mean? Export into third countries means export into non-European Union countries where the patent protection did not exist or has expired. This possibility, this manufacturing option is given throughout the entire SPC lifetime. The import of protected products, even if you want to use them for re-exporting or repackaging, would not be covered by the wafer and is not allowable. Stockpiling means within the context of the wafer that you can manufacture for stockpiling during 6 months preceding the expiry of the SPC, which is not a very long time. So I think easily generated small molecules might be produced within that time frame. More complicated molecules might already face difficulties here. The manufacturing for stockpiling would also extend to related acts which are strictly necessary for the making. So you can already see here the relatively broad wording, and there are some examples which explain it a bit more, but this broad wording is probably unclear, so there is case law to be expected. And then the storing must take place in the European Union country of production. I will give you some additional information on these new definitions which are included here. So as we've seen, the update relates to a making of a product. So we need now, or we have now, a new definition included in the regulation, which is a maker. So the maker is the person established in the European Union on whose behalf the making of the product or the medicinal product containing that product for the purpose of export to third countries or for the purpose of storing is carried out. It's not necessarily the manufacturer itself. And another interesting question is, as I've said before, the question of what act is actually necessary for making the product. So this definition is also quite interesting. So we have here a list, a non-exclusive list of possible acts. So it says such acts can include, so there is still a possibility that the list might be even longer. So these acts would be possessing, offering to supply, supplying, importing, using, or synthesizing an active ingredient for the purpose of making a medicinal product, or temporary storing or advertising for the exclusive purpose of export to third country destinations. As I've said, we believe that the unclarity included here will lead to case law, and maybe we then get some insight into a more a better definition of that of these activities. Okay, can you move it on? Okay, very good. Another key feature is the notification requirement. So the maker must inform the patent office of the country of making. So this reflects a bit the filing situation of the SPC. You have to file the request before the national patent offices. So the national patent offices, like the German patent office, they also are responsible for an implementation of the wafer. So the maker must inform the patent office of the country of making about whether the making is for export only, for stockpiling, or for both, and the countries in which the making, storing, or any related act takes place. So you really have to provide already quite a bit of information here. You need to file this information at least 3 months before the making or any related act. As we've seen, there are several of them. The information has also to include name and address. That's, I think, clear. And you need to inform the SPC holder at least 3 months before the commencement of the activity. So this is a little bit like the US style. There are further requirements to inform the patent office or the SPC holder about changes before they take place. So this will or should hopefully lead to a reduced number of litigation here, but well, let's see how things work out. We have finally a new EU export logo, and this new EU export logo has to be affixed to the packaging of the medicaments. So all products which are made for the purpose of export to third countries have to have this new logo. The idea behind that is to reduce the risk of the product being re-imported to the European Union. Can you move it on? Okay. So that's actually the last slide here. So what are the possible consequences, and is everyone actually liking this this new approach? Well, the European Union experts say that the SPC wafer is about to generate, over the next 10 years, at least 1 billion euro in annual export sales, and we believe, or they believe, I should say, that there are going to be 20 to 25,000 new jobs in the European Union territory, which is quite a bit. However, as you can imagine, the originators do not like this approach. So we have a relatively important originators association, and this EFPIA has indicated its concerns and is of the opinion that the legislation actually sends a signal to the world that Europe is weakening its commitment to IP incentives, which might be correct as well. Some European Union member states have severe concerns with the legislation, in particular Denmark. They are of the opinion that this wafer does not strike the right balance, and it runs the risk of undermining the strong competitive position of the European Union established by the innovative pharmaceutical industry. So it should, according to them, jeopardize or will jeopardize the originators. A similar concern is actually coming from Belgium, France, Ireland, Portugal, Spain, and the Netherlands, and they, however, look at it more from a progressive perspective and say that future legislative initiatives should also include incentives to promote research and development and should strengthen the conditions necessary for the enhancement of IP rights and innovation by the originator. So it goes into the same direction. What will happen is within the next 5 years or after 5 years, a re-evaluation of the situation. So the EU will evaluate the impact of the wafer, and they will in particular then look at the stockpiling provision, which was most controversial. And I would like to thank you for your attention, and should there be any questions, I would be happy to answer them. Okay.
Start. The general topic that has been discussed in relation to this matter is overcoming the barriers to developing a successful IP business strategy. Now, I will be talking about this, but first let me introduce myself. I am from L.S.Davar and Company, and this was founded by late Mr. L.S.Davar, and the legacy carried on under the chairman, Mr. G.S.Davar, who is currently the chairman of the firm, and under the able guidance of Dr. Davar Khemani, who is the managing partner. We are a team of more than 200 members in the firm, dealing in all kinds of IP. And it is a full-service intellectual property law firm which was founded in 1932 in the historic city of Calcutta. So it's one of the oldest law firms of Indian origin, IP law firms of Indian origin. It was set up by Mr. L.S.Davar and currently being managed by the chairman and the managing partner, Dr. Davar Khemani. We have been receiving numerous international awards, accolades, and industry recognitions, and that has really served as a boost for the good work that we have been continuing for the last nearly 80 years. So our experience spans over several decades, and we cater to a large number of industries which are international and domestic companies, and continue to be ranked and felicitated by a number of these like IAM, IP Stars, Economic Times, Global Law Experts, and the like. And we serve and cater to a large number of companies, the Fortune 500 companies, small and medium-sized enterprises, government-funded industries, and universities, who we are the proud IP law firm. It's a law firm, we serve them proudly. Whether developing worldwide intellectual property portfolios or litigating disputes, we focus on practical and positive results, delivering a 360-degree solution to most of their problems. These are some of our exemplary memberships. And we serve also in our neighboring countries. We provide protection for our clients in our neighboring countries, Nepal, Bangladesh, Bhutan, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, Myanmar, etc. And in all these countries, we have our associates with whom we collaborate on a regular basis and provide solutions to our clients worldwide. these are the awards and accolades that we have been receiving. So now I come to the topic, which is pharmaceutical industry, overcoming the barriers to building a successful business strategy. Now, as we all know, the pharmaceutical industry is faced with several challenges today, which may affect its growth in the coming years. But in spite of all these odds, the pharmaceutical industry continues to thrive, and expert opinion has it that it will maintain its current rate of growth for the next 5 years. As it is such an important part of our national and global economy, the success of the pharmaceutical industry is relevant for all. Now, research and development is the core of any pharma company, as it enables drug discovery. But the industry has seen certain restrictions in the R&D ability in the recent past. The launch of major products has slowed down, and companies are restricting their R&D investment. Now, for example, despite the huge potential of the effective and safe new drug for treating Alzheimer's disease, Pfizer has ended its Alzheimer's research program, while Glaxo and AstraZeneca have also cut back on their expenditure on these programs. So, some of these reasons would be the increased cost of bringing a pharmaceutical product into the market, the time taken to commercialize the product, and the uncertainty around the success of the product in the market. So, the first point that I would like to stress on is the restriction in the R&D investments. And there are numerous reasons for such restrictions, like I said, the major ones being the increased cost of commercialization of the product, the time of commercialization of the product. So these are some of the major issues, and like we all know, there are high failure rates in the pharmaceutical industry. Now, I will quote from a source. This is from a survey conducted by Deloitte, and it says, high failure rates, the $2 billion average cost of developing a new drug, and falling returns on investment, down from 10.1% a year in 2010 to 3.2% in 2017 for the big pharma companies, are restraining the launch of high-priced new breakthrough drugs such as those that boosted the market in earlier years. So this is from a survey by Deloitte, and these are the figures. So, now what happened? Okay, so there are pharmaceutical industry, like it's a very specialized industry and cannot be compared to the other forms, other types of industries, because it involves human beings in the trials, and there are lots of other factors that have to be taken into account before a product can be launched into the market. And like in a simple mechanical invention, the moment the product is devised, it is tested and it can be brought into the market. But for a pharmaceutical product, it has to undergo rigorous tests, the clinical trials, and it may take about 6 to 8 years before a pharmaceutical product can be judged to be safe to be brought into the market for human consumption. Something wrong. So this automatically leads to a decrease in the development of new drugs because of the lifespan, and because ultimately by the time the product is brought into the market, it would have I would say, come through a lot of its patent term. Because the patent application is filed right in the beginning, and by the time the drug comes into the market, it's about 6 to 8 years. So a lot of the patent term, if at all, would have expired by then. So there is a decrease in the number of innovative drugs under development. Then there are the expiring patents, the number of important patents on the blockbuster drugs which are expiring. Then there is an increase in competition by the generic companies, the very slow sales growth rates, and tighter regulatory measures. Now, it is known that over the last 10 years, the documents that have to be submitted to the regulatory authorities for bringing a drug into the market have tripled, nearly tripled over these last few years. So, and in addition to this, the regulatory authorities take much longer to approve a new drug. Consequently, the period of patent protection is reduced again by this process, and this results in putting in extra efforts to earn enough profits for a drug. So these are all deterrents to the pharmaceutical industry for bringing a new drug into the market. The situation may be more severe in case of drugs developed through biotechnology routes, especially the ones that utilize gene technology. Then there are also compliance issues, especially the ones related to data integrity. Again, there are the organizational culture, the strategy, and customer orientation issues involved in bringing a drug into the market. And all these factors are causing the pharma companies to change their strategies or growth and sales. Is it? Okay. So, a company can spend a lot of time on developing a new product or a new service, but it should keep in mind that an equal amount of time or money has to be spent on developing a proper IP strategy to ensure the maximum return on the intellectual property. Therefore, to battle against all these odds, the thrust areas would be to develop a robust IP strategy. And in order to do this, the industry has to address a few issues. Like, for instance, in trying to devise a good, robust IP strategy, there are certain factors that should be taken into consideration. Number one, the size of the company. For a small-sized firm, it is not really necessary to have a very well chalked out IP strategy. But for a large company dealing in a number of products, it is very essential that a well charted out IP strategy should be in place to ensure that maximum returns are accrue from the sale of the goods. Now, this is one point. The next point would be of this is in looking at the size of the company, the ownership issues should also be taken into consideration. So the ownership rights, that is the inventorship issues, the other ownership issues like if there are inventors from outside, or if the company is functioning in collaboration with other institutes or other companies, the inventors and the assignments that might have taken place, the other issues of ownership should be taken in consideration so that there are no legal issues which come in at a later stage. Then the company might have publication policies also, which should also be taken into consideration. And this should also, another factor would be to take into consideration all the previous agreements between the company and its employees or its contractors, or between the company and its collaborators. So these are the various factors we have to take into consideration when we look at the company and the size of the company. The next factor that we take into consideration would be, So this is where I am. Then I have discussed the size and structure of the company. The next factor to be taken into consideration is to establish clear guidelines for developing intellectual property. Now, it has to be clearly, there has to be a clear insight into how the intellectual property is to be created. There should be a list of each person contributing to the intellectual property, what form of intellectual property is to be protected, how it is to be protected, and what is the timeline of protection of each one of these intellectual properties, and what are the procedural issues. Then again, after this, to analyze the issues relating to the registrability of the IP, because in the pharma industry there are certain things that we face regarding pharmaceutical inventions, biotechnological inventions, where the non-registrability issues come into play, and even for a very good innovation, it may not finally be patentable or be able to or be covered by any other form of IPR. So, in order to do this, first step would be to search the existing work, that is, so that we don't face any infringement issues or any opposition matters later later on. And the other would be to devise a plan of attack based on such a search if there are certain existing, I would say, co-players in the market. So that plan of attack should also be in the strategy that is in place. And again, the timeline for the entire process, because it is very essential to chalk out and have a clear picture of the timeline in order to estimate the costs that arise, because time means more and more costs. So it is essential that the time frame should be analyzed first thing in the process. Then the third point is analyze the competitive advantage. So whether one can reap the benefits or the rewards of the work from the work that has been generated. So it is very important, because we may have a very innovative product, but we have to clearly analyze whether that product is going to reap the benefits, the profits that we are looking for. So therefore, the steps would be like, what is the value of the product you're wanting to protect? In the current market, would you be able to get a good return on your investment? What is the competitive market? How will competitors market their product or service, similar products or services? How are the competitors doing in the market? And other complementary industries which we can tap into. So these are some of these issues that one might like to look into. And again, the freedom to operate issues. That is also very important in trying to gauge your competitive advantage and the barriers to entry in a marketplace. So that is the other issue. Then analyze third-party interactions. That is also an important issue. That is any third party who could be involved in any portion of the development of this particular product or service should be taken into consideration. So these third parties could include employees, suppliers, partners, contractors, and even customers. So anyone or even people who have taken part in the clinical trials. So the participation of all these people have to be taken into consideration when chalking out the IPR policy. Now, the IPR policy should dictate the employee-employer contracts, the supplier and contractor agreements, the confidentiality agreements, and licensing options. Then, another very important factor is to audit the intellectual property, just to have an overview of what has been going on, what is going on, to get a clear picture of what I actually have. So, conduct an audit of the existing IP and the ownership and historical relationships relating to these properties. Include the scope of protection of the IP in the audit to determine the gaps in protection or risks in the development or protection of the IP. And the most important thing is to find out a proper exit, a proper gateway through which you can exit should there be a problem. It should not be like Abhimanyu, who entered that Chakravyuha and could not come out of it. So one has to have a formal exit strategy in place so that if there is a problem, one knows how to exactly come out of such a situation. So these are the issues which are very important in chalking out a proper IP strategy for the firm. And in doing so, this is a very generalized strategy, but there are certain issues, certain challenges which are typical to the Indian context. Now, if we look at the Indian pharma industry, now certain issues are like, once a product or a biologic or a pharmaceutical ingredient, the active pharmaceutical ingredient has been developed, it is subjected to tests in vivo and or ex vivo experiments on rodents. If the results are positive, then at that stage a patent application may be filed. But in filing a patent application or trying to go for an IPR protection, there is a possibility that there could be a constraint number 1, which I will come to later. Then after that, there has to be the in vivo experiments on higher animals like dogs, pigs, and monkeys. And if there are positive outcomes on efficacy, safety, biological activity, potency, metabolic stability, bioavailability, all these data is available and it is obtained, then 1 to 2 years is already gone. And if the company would like to keep this as a know-how, that is a secret, it may keep it as a know-how, but judging from the problems of keeping an innovation as a know-how, since we do not have the proper legal framework in place for protection of such trade secrets or know-how, one can go for licensing, where again there is a constraint number 2. And then with this data, one can go for an application for an investigational new drug, that is the IND application, and then the clinical trials start. And during the course of the clinical trials, a lot of data is generated. So this data, along with lab data, that also creates a constraint number 3. And these are typical constraints for Indian pharmaceutical scenario. Now, for an Indian, like in India, the additional resources I and J, which was effective from October 11, 2017, and mandates that any firm intending to market a new drug being developed outside of India is required to include Indian patients in the global clinical trials proposed and in the corresponding trials. So that is a requirement very typical of India. And the requirement of the clinical trial must be registered to the Clinical Trials Registry, Indian Medical Council of ICMR, that is Indian Council of Medical Research, by all the sponsors or the applicants. The number of patients globally for global clinical trials and the number of patients to be enrolled from India for the investigational new drug application and the global clinical trials, all this information is needed for submitting the application. Further, any India-specific safety or dosage concerns and investigational tests that have to be done should also be taken into consideration. So these create additional hurdles for the company for bringing the drug into the market. Now, when I spoke about patent filing, I said constraint number 1. And constraint 1 arises from the patent eligibility criteria. Now, novelty, inventive step, and industrial application, these are the justifications that are common in all countries. So there is nothing special about India that has to be justified here. But in addition to this, there are certain, I would say, issues which have to be addressed for a product to be patentable under the Indian system. So there are certain non-patentability issues under clauses A to P of section 3, and out of these sections, the subsections, there are certain subsections which are typically for the pharmaceuticals and drugs. Then again, there are disclosure requirements under section 10, and it was proposed in the guidelines for pharmaceutical compounds, for examination of pharmaceutical related inventions, that each group coming under a Marcus claim, under a Marcus structure, had to be defined separately. Now, this is a requirement which is not present in most other countries. Like even in Europe, if a compound is defined by a Marcus structure, there may be thousands of compounds coming under that structure, but that Marcus compound is still allowed if it is supported by a reasonable number of examples. But the Indian Patent Office has of late started raising new issues that in case of such broad Marcus claims, it has to be supported by a very, very large number of examples. Although they are not certain about the exact number of examples, but the number of examples have to be very large, and there should be at least representative examples to support each and every group. Then NBA requirements, where again this is a typical requirement of India, that if the invention uses natural biological material of Indian origin, then we have to obtain a permission from National Biodiversity Authority, and there is a benefit sharing, and there we are given a license, and the patentee is given a license to finally work the invention. Then if it involves traditional knowledge, that is for the Ayurveda, Unani, and homeopathy, and what is the S for? It comes under Ayush. So it is for all these different kinds of medicines which require, if it is if it is found in the TKDL library, then additional constraints are imposed to prove the patentability of such compositions. The compounds as such are not allowed. Then there is anticipation under section 13 and its remedy under section 29 to 34. Now this is again something which is common to for all areas of technology, not only pharmaceuticals. Now section 3C is related to the discovery of a scientific principle or the formulation of an abstract theory or a discovery of any living thing or non-living substance occurring in nature. So anything that occurs naturally is not patentable. For instance, microorganisms, nucleic acid sequences, proteins, enzymes, compounds, etc. Anything that is directly isolated from natural sources is not allowed, but the process of isolation of such products may be allowed, or if there is any human intervention in any of these products, then such a product may be allowed. But mere human intervention for the sake of making a novel product will not be allowable unless the inventive step issues can be sorted out. Now, another section with which all of us in the patent fraternity have been facing a lot of problem is section 3D, which debars any mere new form of known substances, mere new use of known substances, unless the substance has a remarkably more improved therapeutic efficacy. Now this has come about in the wake of the Gleevec decision, which where mere pharmacokinetic parameters or an improvement in them was not sufficient to justify the patentability. It has to be shown that the compound has remarkably improved therapeutic efficacy in order to be patentable. Again, for pharmaceutical compositions or formulations, section 3E comes into play, which says that a substance obtained by a mere admixture resulting only in the aggregation of the properties of the components thereof, or a process for producing such substance, is not an invention. So we have to prove that if there is a juxtaposition of several compounds in a formulation, the properties of the formulation have to be a quantity more than what would be expected from an addition of the properties of the different components. So that is, the components show synergism between themselves. So these are typical requirements under the Indian Patents Act. Then section 3I, any process for the medicinal, surgical, curative, prophylactic treatment of human beings or animals to render them free of disease or to increase their economic value or that of their products is not allowed. So all this will not be allowed. Now, even dosage claims are looked upon as method of treatment in disguise. Dosage claims are allowed under the EP and US, although India is very favorably inclined towards the EP proceedings. There are certain things that are not allowed by the EPO but not allowed in India. For instance, use claims, which are allowed in EPO. Then these dosage claims which are allowed, but India will not allow such claims. I think I have already crossed my limit. So I will just, I will skip some of these. Now, this was the licensing part which I had discussed. If somebody doesn't want to, if there is a patent, one doesn't want to go for a patent application, wants to keep it as a secret, one can also go for licensing opportunities. So these are the different types of licensing agreements that can be drawn up. It could be an exclusive license, a non-exclusive license. It could be a cross license when there are two or more parties involved in the same kind of business. Then this is also not relevant. This is the third constraint of data protection. Now, since India does not have a proper law in place for data exclusivity, because data exclusivity means here, no data from the originator will be allowed as a reference for filing generic biosimilar drugs or applications. Now, if the lab research all the lab research data generated during the investigational new drug or the new drug application phases, including the data generated from the clinical trials, this data from the originator will not be allowed as a reference for filing generic biosimilar drug applications. But India does not have any law for data exclusivity in place. So that is another hurdle. Now, I think I will skip. This was a case law which I had made, but since I'm already running behind time, I will skip these and maybe take up some questions after Mr. Shamim Ahmad has done his part. These are our offices in Kolkata, New Delhi, and Bangalore. If there is any IP-related problem that anybody has, I think we could try and solve all your problems. So please feel free to contact us if there is anything that you need. Thank you so much.
Okay, I think good evening all, and thank you for bearing for the last session and for the last speaker. I will try to make it as short as possible, and let's change some gear. Although the topic is IP challenges in pharmaceutical industry, but I will just walk you through little bit of biopharmaceutical aspect of the IP. What are the challenges in biopharmaceutical? And with respect to in some personalized medicine. So let me start. Some of my friends told me if your session is post lunch, then start with some celebrity picture that will keep the people awake. So let me start with this news which came in 2014-15 about Hollywood actress Angelina Jolie. when there was some news in New York Times about her going through some testing when her mother died at the age of 56 due to I think it was a ovarian cancer at the age of 56, and then she started looking into is there any way where I can do some preventive care. Then she went for all the testings, and what was found is she had a mutation of BRCA1 or BRCA2 gene, and that mutation is linked with either breast cancer or ovarian cancer. So what was estimated is, it was estimated that she is prone to 87% of risk for breast cancer and 50% risk of ovarian cancer. So she was looking for preventive things, what can be done to stop this. Then what she did is she went this double mastectomy, that is removal of breast, and later on she removed her fallopian tube and ovaries to reduce the risk of these cancers. So what is interesting, why I'm bringing here is, what helped her is the information about the gene which was responsible for the cancer. That was BRCA1 or BRCA2 gene. So that is something which is very important and very critical for treatment of a cancer. So what happened is, what is personalized medicine? So the moment you develop medicine, when we talk about medicine, we consider human population at large. So we don't discriminate between somebody is fat or somebody is thin or somebody is from America or somebody from Indian origin. So we all consider we just average out and do the trial, and as a result, the success rate of any drug is not more than, if it is 50 to 55% or 60%, that is a very good drug. So what is personalized medicine is to use the person's gene information or protein and the environment to prevent or to know what is the cause of the disease. And there is something called theranostics, that is new field where you link the therapeutic testing and then the medicine. So traditional drug, if you talk about traditional drug, so what we try is we try to make just one drug for the whole population. If you're talking about a colon cancer, we just make one drug, and that is the entire population is treated with that cancer is treated with that particular drug. So we were here, traditionally we were in the first zone where we try to make one drug. In the recent past, what happened is people started working on classifying the particular cancer into different classes, especially after emergence of immunotherapy, where they try to classify the patient. And what we want to develop, or where we are heading is now to make it tailor-made, to make it a drug or medicine or therapy for each individual, that we say called personalized medicine. So it's to use this combined knowledge, either genetic information or whatever information you get from a person, and to predict disease susceptibility, disease prognosis, or treatment response, and thereby to improve the person's health. So in a standard treatment, what happens is you take the entire population of a particular disease and you give that therapy. So because of that, the nature of the disease, the cause of the disease might be different. So what happens is some patient will respond, some may not respond, and some even may have adverse effect. So what is happening is in personalized treatment is you classify, you categorize the patient based on the nature of the particular disease, why it is happening. So you do go with the biomarker diagnostic test, or you go with the DNA or whatever test possible, and segregate the patients. Once the patients are segregated, then give the right medicine, right therapy for that. Then what is happening is you are going to see the effect in all the cases. So the real breakthrough in personalized medicine came after the sequencing of human genome become possible. So in early 2000s, when it became possible because of this advancement in computer science, it became possible to map the human gene. And then, but the problem was the mapping of a human gene is damn expensive. So it was like I was reading an article, it was finding like you have an encyclopedia which is of 2000 of page, and somebody will ask you to find there is a there is a mistake in one word having two letter missing. So even human gene, our DNA sequence is comprises of 20 times of that encyclopedia. So it become almost impossible to map it. So because of this advancement of technology, it become possible, but it was damn expensive when it came. So earlier it was approximately 100 million you have to spend for doing genome human sequencing. But now it has come to around $1,000, and we are expecting it will go even beyond even below that. So this is a very breakthrough in developing and taking forward the personalized medicine. So what is personalized medicine? Its promise, or we say it's precision medicine, and it's tailored to genetic changes in each person's cancer, and information about genetic changes in tumor can help decide which treatment will work best. This treatment is still not routine, although it's developed, but it is developed for a specific patient. It's not routine, and so it's designed to target a specific changes that are being tested. And so what happens is to be eligible for a personalized medicine trial, what has happened is it has very important to know the genetic changes. What is the cause of the tumor? If the cause is known, and if a trial is going for that particular cause, if a target is known, what is the mutation, which target is responsible for that particular cancer, and if there is some development going on, then you can enroll for that one. So yes, it doesn't apply to everyone. It is there is a condition if the genetic changes is targeted by the present treatment, then only it is possible. Otherwise, it is not. And how do you do is, I think, how do you know the genetic changes is by the biopsy or the human genome sequencing. So the overall objective of developing a personalized medicine is to find out the right drug in the right dose and at the right time and for the right patient. So let's move on about the IP challenges. I have categorized them into 3 parts. So the first part is linked with the exclusivity, where we have different kinds of exclusivity for developing any new products, whether it is biologics or any small molecule. For biologics, there is normally the exclusivity is 5 years for a small molecule, whereas in case of biologics, it goes for around 12 years. In US, I'm talking, as per the BPCI guidelines. And there another problem is with the patentability standards. So what should be the patentability standard? What should be the scope of the claims, and what kind of rejection you can expect about novelty, obviousness? And then is the subject matter, which is the most important. Whether the subject matter of the claim is patentable or not. So I'll come to that. So I've taken that into 2 classes. There could be 2 subject matter of personalized medicine. One is the diagnostic methods or the technology, the way how do you diagnose the patient, and second is how do you treat them, or what is the product. So there has been a very good significant development by US cases. I think the first important case for the personalized medicine is the Prometheus case between Mayo versus Prometheus, which directed to method of optimizing the dose of a drug based on measures of levels of specific metabolites, but that was held as it was non-patentable law of nature. So this decision have influenced biomarker invention claiming practices. Prometheus claimed a method of detecting a drug metabolite and using a correlation between the metabolites and an effective dose to optimize the dose administered. The optimizing step was articulated as wherein clause. So what was that? It wherein the level of metabolites indicates a need to increase or decrease the dose. So currently claims that relate to a natural correlation will need to include a specific pre-solution activity or a specific post-solution activity or both. So if you want a patent like that, then there must be a pre-solution activity or post-solution activity or both. So if we take that standard, and there was one study published, so they have done a study for 2,300 granted patents, US patents, which were directed to genotyping methods, then they found that 79% are likely to be patent eligible in view of Prometheus. So there are only around 20% which recites a specific pre-solution activity, and there is less than 1% which recites post-solution activity, and less than 1% which recites both. So moving on the further development, there was the case between Association of Molecular Pathology and Meridien came, where the court considered the patentability of therapeutic screening methods, diagnostic methods, and isolated DNA and cDNA molecule, which are related to BRCA gene. The US federal decision in 2011 and 12 both found Meridien's DNA and cDNA and therapeutic screening claims valid. However, the diagnostic method claims were invalid. So in 2013, the US Supreme Court has upheld Myriad cDNA claim. So complementary DNA claims were found because it requires human intervention. That claims were held valid, whereas the genomic DNA was found as non-patentable subject matter. The court held that a naturally occurring DNA segment is product of nature and not patent eligible merely because it has been isolated. So if it is just isolated, it will not be patentable. But that amino acid sequence that do not exist, for example, in cDNA, that is patentable. That was held patentable. The case was seen as narrowing the scope of patent eligible subject matter in the area of naturally occurring products. So the precision medicine value chain is increasingly non-linear and require more integration of activities across different organizations, and organizations impacted including pharmaceutical companies, diagnostic companies, hospitals, and research institutes. So we need there should be a robust IP strategies which are very essential for an effective value chain. IP strategies for molecular diagnostics are not well established. So following the Meridien decisions declaring that the claims on isolated gene sequences are valid, and Mayo versus Prometheus, which declared that, or we put a benchmark, method claims on genetic risk assessments were invalid, the future of gene patent remained to be uncertain. So I will just give one specific example about one of the very specialized treatment that is called chimeric antigen receptor T cell, that is called CAR T cells. So CAR T cells, what happened is it's a very recent development. I think just a couple of months only there were 2 products got approved for this treatment in US. So what happened is in this one you take a T cell of a patient and you know what the responsible gene for what the reason for the cancer. You take the T cell from a patient and genetically reprogram them to express on their outer surface the chimeric antigen receptor, and once the red one, once that is expressed, once the chimeric antigens are expressed on the receptor, then grow them in a large scale, grow this modified T cell into large scale, and then infuse them in the body. So what happens is once you infuse them, it has a specific antigen to fight with the cancer. So then it works almost 99.9%. So this is as I told you, there are recent development. There are 2 products which got approved by US FDA. One is Yescarta and other is Chimeria. And I just did some recent searches on clinical trial, on clinicaltrial.gov, and to see how many clinical trials are going on. I found there are more than 900 clinical trials are going globally on CAR T therapy. And largely, and most of them are going in China. So what are the problems in the CAR T therapy is in conventional drug discovery, what happens is you develop one product for the whole patient. The patient size is huge, but you just take one product. Then you for one product all the steps you have to complete for developing a product and all manufacturing, processing, and everything. All the aspects you have to settle for just one product, and patient size is huge. Whereas in CAR T, what happens? You take one product and do the whole step, all those steps, just for the one patient. The costs are really exorbitant. So the question is, how does the IP will play a role? So I did what I found is there are good development in the CAR T therapy in the patent filing space. If I see number of patent families, the unique patent families, so it started growing in 2013, where you could see hardly around 25 patents families in 2013, but within 3 years, by 2016, the number of patent families has gone to more than 250. So just a little bit of Indian touch about what could be the possible scenario in Indian context. So I think I will just skip this part section. These are the possible clauses where you are likely to get cited under Indian patent law, section 3C, 3E, 3I. I think my core panelist just now she explained about these section in detail, but these are likely to come into play. So what are the possible claims? What can be claimed in CAR T technology? So one possibility is you can claim the individual antigen, the antigen which you insert on the T cell, or it could be a fusion of two antigens, or the epitomic region, or the transformation of T cell into CAR T. How do you transform it? Or it could be growing the CAR T cell. If there is a special technique involved in multiplying the CAR T cell, that could also be a subject matter of patent. Of course, and the last one could be a transfusion to human, although I know it's not be patentable in India, but if there is something involved, it could be patentable in other jurisdiction like US. So I did some searches in the Indian Patent Office and to see whether a patents are granted on CAR T, and if it is granted, what are the claims? So what I found is there are not many, but I found there are around 10 to 15 patents are granted in CAR T, and those patents are either claiming the chimeric gene or antigen as a product or process. Sometimes they have claimed as a process for preparing polyclonal antibodies specific to a chimeric protein, or sometimes there is a method claim, or there is a vector which helps in making chimeric antigen receptor, or the composition, the recombinant antibody. So these are the possible claim language which are already granted by the Indian Patent Office. Okay, and there is a good development happening from the Indian perspective, because in last this November 2019, the Indian government has published a national guidelines for gene therapy product development and clinical trials. And there are I'm seeing a couple of companies have started working on CAR T very seriously. So there is a hope that there will be some technology coming up for the Indian population, Indian patient. So the final slide. The conclusion is there is no certainty. This technology, especially about the IP, does not get certain, predictable, strong rights that protect the substantial investments in personalized medicine in general. There is a very high cost of drug development, and it's linked with a very small financial return because you develop it for one patient. And then there is an uncertainty in the scope and strength of patent protection. It's too early to say. And there is a consistent move to amend and reform patent law that has led to unpredictable in patent application and prosecution, which in turn undermine investment and innovation in personalized medicine. So there is a lack of consensus on whether patents act as necessary incentive in the field of personalized medicine or innovation and development such that they should be strengthened. So thank you very much for your attention. If you
Thank you, Mr. Ahmad. Is there any question from the audience? If not, then I would like to thank Mr. Ladendorf for his insights into the supplementary protection certificates, providing the legal basis for the SPCs, the validities, the calculation of the SPC terms, the waivers and the concerns about the waivers. And we are looking forward to some case laws to actually gauge the situation, because it's still in quite its nascent stages. Yeah. And I thank Dr. Ahmad for a very insightful talk on personalized medicine. We have come to know a lot about this from his talk, and regarding patient stratification. And what interested me most was the Prometheus case. I will definitely have a look into it. And I am sure the audience has also benefited from his insightful lecture. So we will thank the audience for a patient hearing, and thank you very much. I don't know, there will be people for the cocktail, so enjoy yourself. Otherwise, good night and bye to the others. Thank you.